All right, everybody. Hello and welcome to Activated Healing, How to Awaken Your Innate Self-Healing Ability. So this is one of my absolute most favorite topics because I find that it's something that all of us can relate to. So I really hope that you learn something this evening and take something home that can be very useful for you. So I want to start off this evening by posing a question. How is it that as a society, we spend more money, time, and energy than ever before on our personal health and well-being? Yet, as a people, we are sicker and more miserable than ever. How is that possible? Well, I have a few opinions about that. First and foremost, conformity. We have been taught to conform, to do things this way, to look like that person, to try this diet, to follow this trend. Conformity is an insidious disease because no two people are alike. In addition, we search for health-related answers on Google, and while that's not terrible, it is when we're not listening to our own bodies first, right? When we're searching for external answers for internal problems, there becomes a disconnect there. Now, I'm not saying that we don't need external support and help, but that should be in partnership with the messaging and the information that we are receiving from our own minds and bodies. We pay other people to tell us what's wrong with us. And that, there's a serious disconnect there for the same reason. And lastly, we worship institutions and science as if they were God, and they are not. So that, my friends, is why I feel we are in the health crisis and conundrum that we are as humans, but more specifically within our country. So also, many of us have been shamed, repressed, disempowered by those same systems and institutions that claim to support us. And as a result of that, we are anxious, we're sick, and we are on a constant search for true meaning and purpose. And that state of being only feeds those systems and institutions, and they continue to profit from our collective disempowerment. And that's a really big problem. So there has never been a better time for all of us to understand our true power to heal, to create, and to protect ourselves, especially in the current climate of uncertainty and unprecedented chaos, right? Because guess what? Each and every one of you have an innate ability to heal from anything, from anxiety to cancer. And I'm going to talk a lot about the how of that. So, and I'm talking a lot more than just immune function, because of course that's obvious here, right? Your immune system is this amazing part of your body that is constantly fighting off viruses and pathogens, toxicity each and every day. Your body is designed to do that. So your immune system is this beautiful protection that you come into this world with. And, there's a lot of variability in immunity, obviously. We get in the way of our own immunity by our lifestyle choices, by stress, by the other things that hinder that function, the appropriate functioning, optimal functioning of our immune system. But there's so much more. So I'm not really going to talk about immune function today. I'm going to talk about the other things that people aren't really talking about in the health community that really make a huge difference in activating your innate ability to heal. So today I'm going to teach you 3 pathways that will help you to activate that innate ability. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nicole Trombley, and I'm an empowerment coach, a spiritual teacher, and a healer. My divine mission is to help as many people as possible step into their power. And so I just want to start off too by thanking you all for being so willing to learn more about this very important topic. I really believe that, we need to be talking about these things more. So I want to tell you a little bit about my story. I have a really interesting story. From a very young age, I've been disempowered. I came into this world and I was such a force. I was such a light, and I made a lot of people really uncomfortable because of that. I knew that as a child, and it made me uncomfortable to make other people uncomfortable. I didn't understand that at the time. I could just feel that happening. You know, the other really formative thing for me as a young child was that my father abandoned my mother and I from a very young age. He escaped the system throughout my life and was never really, well, he never participated in my life in a meaningful way. And so I was constantly afraid of anyone else abandoning me. And so basically, I just conformed to what I thought everybody else wanted me to be. You know, I became a collection of other people's goals, other people's beliefs, other people's desires, because I felt like that was the only way that I could receive and keep love, which is really sad to think about now, but that's just my story. And so as a result of that, I suffered from severe anxiety and depression for most of my formative years. Again, I didn't really know it at the time that that's what it was, but you know, it was a struggle. It was a real struggle. I also suffered from perfectionism. I came from a very have-not family. I came from, you know, circumstances that weren't ideal in a lot of ways. And so my perfectionism became this vehicle of escaping that, you know, and rising above it. And it really worked, you know. So because of my perfectionism, you know, I ended up getting a full academic scholarship to college. And I also ran Division I track and cross country there. And so, you know, I was highly successful and very high functioning, despite the fact that I did have severe anxiety and depression. When I got to college, that all sort of fell apart for me because I couldn't perform at that level in the same way that I had leading up to that point. So I kind of fell apart. When I first sought help through our medical system in college, I was so hopeful, you know, finally a solution for the pain that lived inside of me. But all they did was hand me a prescription. Now, you know, one way that I medicated myself in college was the use of drugs, and they really worked. You know, but a short time after that, I realized that they were making my life unmanageable and that also had to change. And so when I went into the medical system and had a therapist, and I fully disclosed my drug use to her. And the first thing that she did was prescribe me Ativan, which is a highly addictive substance, which I didn't know at the time. So needless to say, that was not a very good experience. I didn't get the help that I needed. Basically, she handed me a Band-Aid, another fix, another way to distract myself away from the true cause of my suffering. But I took that pill because at the time, it was my only hope. So guess what? That pill didn't work. Shortly thereafter, I was misdiagnosed as bipolar, and I spent literally years taking psychotropic drugs that I never needed. That also ended poorly. When I finally was able to admit that not only were those drugs not helping me, but they were making me more sick, that's when my awakening happened. I began searching for the underlying cause of my anxiety. I started reconnecting with my body. I remembered that my body is designed to heal itself and that I was getting in the way of all of that process with my many Band-Aids, like food, drugs, alcohol, stress. You know, I had very many Band-Aids. I started to trust my body and I started to listen, and life really changed from that point on. You know, I am not here to condemn medication and conventional medicine. I actually think they're miracles, and they have their place. Absolutely they do. But as a society, in my opinion, I think we overuse them. I think they're handed out way too readily without really truly addressing, you know, what the underlying cause of these things actually are. We're taught to be dependent on external solutions. And usually, you know, that's only sustainable for a certain period of time. So, you know, as a result of this culture in our medical system, you know, we've learned to look outside of ourselves for answers. You know, looking up symptoms on Google is no big deal. Everybody does that. I do that. Okay, so I'm not here to judge us for that. I'm just telling you that that is not a normal culture, but That's not normal, but it is what our culture has taught us to do. So again, I already mentioned that we pay other people to tell us what's wrong with us rather than listening and strengthening our own very powerful mind-body connection. Your body literally speaks to you every single day. Not only every day, but your body speaks to you every moment of every day. Are you listening? Because most people don't. So that is really the first step, truly. Now, as an intuitive coach and healer, that's exactly what I do, is that I help people to listen to their bodies and reactivate the power that lives within them, that already exists in there, which includes your innate healing ability. Our society wants a quick fix. Our society promotes Band-Aids, and the institutions in place to serve us are very quick to hand them out. So the first question that I have for all of you today, well, I guess technically the second question, what are your Band-Aids? What are you using to cover up the true nature of what's happening inside of you? What are you refusing to look at in your life? What are the messages that your body is communicating to you that you're ignoring? What part of you is unexpressed or repressed or silenced? I work with a lot of people. I have worked with a lot of people over the years who, talk about feeling fatigued and, really tired and having a lot of, reasons to slow down. And yet the culture, their mindset, their culture speaks something different. They aren't willing to do that. They're not willing to go to bed a little earlier. They're not willing to take a day off, and it's really dangerous, because if you ignore the messages of your body long enough, that's how we end up in the spaces of disease and chronic illness, truly. So that's just a little bit of background of my own story and how I have moved through this very process on my own, coming home to myself and the wisdom that is my own body, that has all of its own answers. It doesn't mean that I don't need external help and support. It just means that I need to be doing that in conjunction, in partnership with the truth that lives within me. As a spiritual teacher and coach, I empower people. I help people reconnect with that deeper wisdom within. I help people understand the underlying mental and emotional patterns that are keeping their minds stuck, their bodies sick, and their souls asleep. And today, I'm going to teach you how to activate your innate healing ability using self-awareness, self-love, and self-care. So if you are a client of mine, or if you know my teachings at all, you know that I live by these three points. Although today we're going to take a different spin on them a little bit. So first and foremost, let's talk about self-awareness. So self-awareness simply is understanding truly all aspects of yourself. And this includes all aspects, and some of you already know this about me. My biggest complaint about conventional medicine is that it really only treats the body. I know psychiatry and psychology are designed to treat the mind, but so much of what psychology and psychiatry have become today are just medications and finding out which one suits you best. And I personally, I've been through that, and it was devastating to me. And, those drugs ruined my life for years. And it wasn't until I got pregnant, well, actually, I guess it was when I got pregnant with Aiden, my first son, that I said, I can't do this anymore. I know what these drugs are doing to my own body. I can't do that to somebody else's. And so it really was at that point that I decided, this is it. Like, I'm going to figure this out on my own, not on my own, but I'm going to figure this out, because I truly believe in my own ability to heal. So that's the wisdom that I have to share. So we are multidimensional, and we have 4 aspects, essentially: the physical aspect, mental aspect, emotional aspect, and spiritual aspect. And once again, conventional medicine only treats the body. It's just one part. And often the body isn't creating disease on its own. Disease often comes from the other 3 aspects. It comes from a disconnect, a dissonance, a gap in your emotional health, your spiritual health, or your mental health. And that's really important. Energy always precedes matter. That's fact. And so we know that that's truly where disease comes from. It's a lot more than just having a bad lifestyle. This is, again, why two people can smoke for 40 years, but perhaps one of them gets sick, one of them doesn't, because there's so many other complexities involved beyond just the human body. So self-awareness really means getting to know all aspects of yourself in a deep and intimate way. You reclaim your power when you have awareness, understanding, and self-care at all four of those levels. And so often when you're dealing with a health crisis, you have to be able to look at this, your health crisis or whatever it is that you're dealing with from all four of those perspectives. Healing requires a deep intimacy with all four levels of your being. Most of us don't have that. We're not taught how to deal emotionally or to deal with our emotions. We're not taught about mindset and to make sure that, the values, beliefs, and the constructs of your mind are actually your own. Nobody talks about these things. And so much of self-awareness truly is deprogramming ourselves from everything else, right? From conformity, from, this one diet should work for everybody, or this one form of exercise is the best. It just doesn't work that way. So truly you have to get to know and understand all four levels, all aspects of your being. Authenticity truly is a superpower when it comes to your innate healing ability, because when you truly know yourself in a deep and intimate way, it's really easy to find the answers and the solutions to what you're dealing with. It just, self-awareness, I find, takes the longest part of the journey, because, I know for me, when when my life fell apart in my early 20s, I realized that I was just a collection of other people's opinions and trends and conformity. And it took me a really long time to separate from all of that, because it was like, wow, if I don't like this, or if I'm not that, then who am I? And it was a really scary place for me to go, because I didn't know what I was going to be on the other end of that. So I think that, we find safety in conformity to a certain degree, but we also find a lot of other things like anxiety and depression, because we're not living our true purpose and we're not living authentically. I believe that anxiety and depression, truly a primary cause of anxiety and depression, are that we're not living our true purpose, and we're not exercising our power and our sovereignty. And so, there's a part of our soul that doesn't like that. And so there's this constant dissonance happening of, oh, well, this is who I really am, but this is what my life looks like. And those two things just don't match up. So self-awareness really helps you get an understanding and a grounding of who you really are, what you really need, what you really want, and how you can find those things, how you can pull in the various people and practices and systems that can actually help you. So again, realizing too that self-awareness, the journey of self-awareness, is moving away from external answers and moving inward to your internal solutions. Your body already knows what it needs. It already knows. You just have to listen and make space for those answers to surface and be heard. So the next question I have for all of you is, who were you before the world told you who you should be? I know that's a really big question, but I highly suggest, marking that somewhere in your journal or on your wall, and just allowing that to percolate into your consciousness, because that's a big ask of yourself. It's a great investment. So first and foremost, okay, where do we begin with self-awareness? Okay, so now we know why self-awareness is important. Where do you begin? First and foremost, learn the practice of discovering that true self sitting inside of you. And from there, everything becomes easier. It is a practice though. It's not like, okay, one day I'm just going to decide to really get to know who I am, and 24 hours later, boom, I'm wearing my authenticity cape. No, the journey back to authenticity is absolutely a journey. I have to tell you, I'm still on this journey, and I've been doing this for 20 years now. 20 years I've been coming home to myself, and I feel more alive in myself than I ever have been. And so it's totally worth it. Take it from me. Also, get to know, and as many of you know, I'm a huge proponent of inner child work. I find inner child work is one of the most profound and simplest ways of really addressing, some of our trauma and some of the ways in which we are still affected by our early experiences. So I highly suggest getting to know the inner child within each of you who likely didn't get what she or he needed when they were younger and continues still to act out to this day. Also, the first step for any of us as we create a life of our own is to move inward. And so I really just want to drive that point home. Innate healing begins from moving here to here. And there are many, many ways to do that. So first and foremost, again, if you know my teachings at all, the first suggestion that I have within self-awareness is to have a daily practice. Really, really commit to yourself to get to know yourself, to understand yourself, and to spend time with yourself. You have a relationship with yourself, yet most of us don't look at it that way. We spend more time concerned and worried about the other people in our life, when really we are the most important person. And when we are more authentic and when we love ourselves, our relationship with everyone else in our life improves, truly. And we become more available in a way to those people. It's kind of a paradox, but it's very true. There are many different ways, there are many different practices out there to help with this as well. So, for example, journaling, meditation. Two of my very favorites are yoga and qigong. So yoga really was a transformative practice for me. I was an athlete. I was a Division I athlete. I was a runner for very many years, a competitive runner. And, I tried yoga in college and I thought it was a joke. I was like, I can't do this. I have better things to do than just sit around and breathe. Boy, was I wrong. It wasn't until years later when I moved back to Pittsburgh and a friend of mine introduced me to this particular studio in Pittsburgh. And it was life-changing. At first it was just a really good workout. And I left there sore and excited, thinking that, oh my goodness, I feel parts of my body that I didn't even know that I had. Clearly I'm missing something. And so I kept going back. And after about a year of consistent once a week yoga practice, something different happened. The spirituality of yoga backdoored me completely. And what I realized that yoga was the only time in my life, other than when I was sleeping, where I was fully focused on what I was doing in the moment. I wasn't worried about the bills. I wasn't worried about the job. I was fully present for what was happening there. And I also had this beautiful communion with my body that I did not have prior to that practice. Qigong is something that I do less yoga now and I do more Qigong. Qigong is, if you have not tried Qigong, it is simple, it's easy, and it is very powerful. And Qigong is essentially where you are working with your body's own energy systems and can be really healing, very, very healing. I'm not really going to talk about this too much today, but part of self-awareness too is really understanding your body's energy systems. I joke, since we're talking about yoga, that, the chakras are far more than just the colorful wheels on the yoga wall in your studio. There's a lot to be said for working with your energy systems because energy precedes matter. And oftentimes, if you have a resistance or toxicity, or, if you have the start of an illness, it can be found in your energy systems long before it shows up and manifests in your physical form. And so working with your energy systems is really a profound and activating way to take charge of your health. So an energy work is vast and huge, everything from acupuncture to Qigong to Reiki. There are multiple different modalities. So I really highly suggest, as part of your self-care practice, getting to know your energy systems, learning how to work with them, and trying different things. So, yes. So the first step, as I said, for any of us, as we create this life of our own, is moving inward, however you see fit to do that. And while you're looking inward, how do you truly feel about yourself? So this is our segue into the second thing we're going to talk about this evening, which is self-love. Most of us have really dysfunctional relationships with ourselves. The lack of self-love that we experience as a people right now is scary and unacceptable, okay? Because hurt people hurt people. And so much of the violence and the chaos that we see amongst humanity right now is because people really don't feel good about themselves. People have a lot of unreconciled anger and violence in their hearts, and that turns into violence toward others. And so self-love is a big problem. You know, we think it's simple, but it actually is quite profound and is truly a superpower. Self-love is our natural state of being. So when we are born into this world, we love ourselves completely. And somewhere along the way, for most of us, we learn that we are broken, we learn that we're unworthy, and we are incapable. Often, these beliefs are the very root of our problems. The good news is that we can relearn how to love ourselves. It is a process and takes a lot of time. Again, I've been on this journey 20 years, and I still have, you know, an inner critic, and I still have, you know, my isms that rear their ugly heads every once in a while. I'm happy to say that I use them as springboards and not hammocks these days, and that they don't control me anymore. I am truly free of, well, again, who knows? Just for today, I'm sure I have many more other things to work on. But I can honestly say that, you know, at every step of that journey of self-love, it's been rewarding, you know, understanding truly just how powerful reconciling that relationship with myself can be. When you begin to love and accept yourself unconditionally, everything, and I mean everything in your life will start to work out. You know, not only do you become your own best friend and your best partner, but your opinion becomes the one that matters the most. And you begin to advocate for yourself. You begin to truly disengage from the rigmarole of other people's opinions and the rest of society, and truly start to listen to your authentic, deep desires and needs. That's what self-love facilitates. So, where do you begin with self-love? I suggest by starting to truly forgive yourself for your past mistakes. Often our past mistakes create a lot of resistance. We have a hard time moving forward or thinking ourselves worthy or treating ourselves to the luxurious self-care that we really actually need, because we just feel that we've messed up, or, you know, we've hurt people, or we didn't do a good job at this or that. And we imprison ourselves in those mistakes and those self-resentments. So that's a really good place to start, is start by listening to how you talk to yourself. You know, and if you would talk to yourself, well, let me pose this a different way. Often we wouldn't talk to anybody else the way that we talk to ourselves internally. And that's a big problem, because why? Why would we treat ourselves that way? What did we ever do to deserve such horrible treatment from ourselves, and criticism and disregard and lack of boundaries? You know, all of that stems from a lack of self-love. Treat yourself with compassion and kindness. You know, remember that you're human and you are truly doing the best that you can. And some days that might look different than others. But at the end of the day, you're doing the best that you can. So I have this wonderful mantra that's very simple, and many of you on this call already know this, but tell yourself every day, I love you and I accept you just the way that you are. And so while this may feel difficult at first, and if it feels difficult, that's more indication that you need to do this as often as possible. But that is a really wonderful mantra to adopt, so that you have this gateway of not only forgiveness, but of self-acceptance, that, you know, whatever it is that I'm dealing with, I love and accept myself anyway. I have literally trained myself with that affirmation. So when I was early in my journey, I couldn't bear to tell myself that. It really wasn't until, wow, I mean, so I've been on this journey for 20 years. I want to say in 2016 was when I discovered the work of Louise Hay. And Louise Hay is a great place to start if self-love is a missing gap for you. But when I read her work, she was the one who suggested this mantra of telling yourself, I love you and I accept you, just the way that you are. And so I've only really adopted that mantra since 2016, but it's been life-changing. It's been life-changing. I can't even tell you all of the benefits that have come into my life by just taking that approach. I didn't believe it at first when I started saying it, but after a while, it became automatic. And I literally rewired my brain, in addition to all the other work that I was doing as well for that. So self-love also strengthens and supports all of the other self-care practices that you're doing. If you love yourself, you're not going to miss those things. You're not going to miss your daily practice. You're not going to say yes to something that you really mean no. And you are going to do your best to find the answers specifically and uniquely yours. So truly, that is how self-love is a magic elixir. When you love and accept yourself unconditionally, you are activating your sovereignty. And by sovereignty, I mean freedom. Freedom to make your own choices, to think for yourself, and to not necessarily listen to what other people are telling you to do, even though maybe they're making friendly suggestions, but you are ultimately making the final decision for yourself. That is sovereignty. Knowing and being able to stand in your choices and know that you are doing the best for yourself that you possibly can. So that's self-love. Third and finally, we're going to talk about self-care. Now, some of you might be thinking to yourself, well, this is obvious. If we're talking about activating our innate healing ability, clearly we need to take care of ourselves. Yes, that's true. Your immune function basically depends upon your lifestyle choices and the amount of self-care that is present and consistent in your life. I believe that there are two different types of self-care. There's universal self-care and there's unique self-care. Universal self-care, you probably guessed it, is universal. These are the things that all human beings should do, and that includes eating a clean diet, removing toxins regularly, getting good sleep, moving your body regularly, meditation, stress management, having good relationships, having a good sexual relationship, not only with yourself, but with your partner, having healthy relationships with the material things in your life, on and on and on. So we can agree that there are certain things that everybody really should do. No one can come to me and say, sorry, I don't need to drink fresh, clean water. That's just not me. So we're not going to talk about universal self-care today. Today we're going to talk about unique self-care. And for unique self-care, in order to understand what that means for you, that requires self-awareness and it requires self-love. Because without those two things in place for you, it's going to be really hard to understand what it is you truly need to activate your innate healing ability. If you're constantly listening to other people, if you're constantly conforming, if you're constantly Googling, and listening to other people's solutions and external solutions, you're still missing what your body, your mind, your soul truly need. And so first and foremost, when we talk about unique self-care, it goes back to those four aspects. All right, so self-care is and truly most of universal self-care, most of it, not all of it, but most of it falls under the category of taking care of our bodies, taking care of our physical aspect. Well, that's just one part of who we are. So I ask all of you, what does your self-care look like for your mental aspect? What does your self-care look like for your emotional aspect? How are you dealing with emotions and repressed emotions and emotional toxicity? Because we all have it, and how are you dealing with how are you caring for your spiritual aspect? In my humble opinion, spirituality is the missing link for humanity. It is truly the reason why we are as sick as we are. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. So that's first and foremost, is having self-awareness, self-love, and truly self-care at all four of those levels. One way that I work with that in my groups is we talk about, and my group, my Soul Mastery friends that are on the call tonight haven't heard this yet, but they will in the next coming weeks. We talk about what is the meditation for all four aspects, and really diving into the various ways that we need to take care of ourselves so that we can be fully embodied in our self-care rather than imbalanced by just focusing on, for example, our bodies and our minds, because in American culture specifically, we're obsessed with those things. We're obsessed with our bodies and the way that they look and manipulating and controlling them into some ideal. We're also obsessed with our we're obsessed with one aspect of our mindset, which is our intellect and work and grades in school. Everybody needs to go to a four-year college. Your grades are everything. And it's just one aspect, you know, like our intellect is literally just one part of our mental aspect. And so, you know, it's really, and so we fall out of serious imbalance when we're only focusing on one or two and not all of those things. Your self-care is a top priority. And for most people, this isn't the case. So often when I work with people, this is the hardest part. You know, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So my background actually is in psychology, and you know, the Maslow hierarchy of needs is literally a triangle, and it has 5 different levels. And the philosophy says that you can't transcend a level until you work with each one. So the very bottom of that pyramid are basic needs, self-care, okay? Getting adequate nutrition, getting adequate rest, getting movements, managing your stress. And so if you don't have those things, you can't move on to these other 4 to be a complete, embodied, purposeful person. Well, guess what? Most people in our country are not even actively trying, even in that first level. And so this is no different. People don't treat personal growth as importantly as they should. I don't know if importantly. Anyway, you know, my business is kind of a hard sell, you know, as an empowerment coach, because the work can be difficult, you know, and your personal growth is the greatest investment that you can make for your health, your happiness, and your success. And so making time to really reconcile the things that you're struggling with as a person, within your personality, you know, within your history, your trauma, is invaluable. Because when you work on these things, you find all your answers and everything falls into place. Your activated, your innate healing ability automatically activates as a result of making that investment, taking the time, and really treating your personal growth like any other serious commitment in your life. And so, you know, self-care isn't always that simple. And so when I work with people, often, like, we get stuck there. Because if I'm working with someone and they're still not making time for the things that they deem important, like meditation or, you know, exercise, or, you know, taking time to find out what diet is going to work best for them, it's really hard to work on those higher level things. It just is. It becomes really hard to change your mindset. It really, you know, it's really, really important to understand that this is everything. Like, we are everything. We have this one body and this one lifetime. And if you want to live your best life, you've got to have self-care. You've got to make it important. You know, self-care requires a deep intimacy with ourself to truly listen to what our deepest needs are. Because once we fall into the category of unique self-care, it's different for everybody. You know, for example, some of my deepest needs, to be alone. I didn't realize this about myself until, well, I mean, it's interesting, actually, and I'm just kind of thinking about this as I'm speaking about it, but, you know, when I had my second child, I started, you know, to realize, and I started to work from home around that time, and I started to realize that I felt crazy all the time and really grumpy. And, you know, apart from having a nursing child pretty much up until the age of 3, you know, I didn't have a lot of space alone. And as a child, I was an only child to a single parent. I had a lot of alone time, and I hated to be alone as a child. And so as I got older, you know, I compulsively wanted people around me. I used to sleep with the TV on at night because I didn't want to be alone. So I didn't know this about myself until I became more authentic, until I took the time to truly understand who I am. And interestingly, you know, I have a profession where I'm around a lot of people. I love people. I love working with people. It fills me in ways that I can't even begin to articulate. But COVID actually has taught me that I am actually an introvert. I'm an extroverted introvert, but I most definitely am an introvert. And I require a lot of alone time. So much of my work is output and giving and helping. And if I don't have like at least an equal match to that, I don't do my work very well. It's very obvious, I think, if you're my client, you start to pay attention, you can easily tell when I haven't had my alone time. Other examples of my unique self-care, nature. When I was a kid, I did not grow up in, a beautiful outdoor area, I don't think, in my opinion. I grew up along the Monongahela River, which was highly polluted. And, the smell in the air was different every day. And so, being outside was not really I was outside all the time as a kid, but in terms of camping or enjoying the great outdoors, that was not something that my family did. And so, and it's interesting now, I can look back to myself as a child, and I was obsessed with nature books. I used to read field guides about different wildflowers and plants and mushrooms, and I understand why now. And being outside for me is absolutely imperative. I get outside every day. I spend most of my time outside because being indoors just feels really confining to me. I'm a completely different person as a result of realizing these are truly my deep needs. My deep needs aren't going to be the same as your deep needs. I can't tell you what your deep needs are, although as a coach, I think I'm really good at asking really good questions and helping people discover that. But ultimately, I can give you all the suggestions in the world. But ultimately, you have to make that journey inward and uncover what really feeds your soul. And so I ask all of you, what are the things in your life that, really light you up? What brings you joy? Is it cooking? Maybe it's knitting. Maybe it's, who knows, comedy. Self-care can be so many different things. It could be taking baths. It could be gardening. It can be reading. It can be arts and crafts. It can be so many different things. If you have a hard time connecting with that, the inner child can be helpful too, because often when we're younger, we naturally seek the things that we know are going to bring us the most joy. And then as we grow older, we lose touch with those things because life takes over. And so, just start to ask yourself, where do if I had an hour to spend and I could do anything I wanted, but it couldn't involve another person or work or chores or the household, what would it be? What would it be? If money were not an issue, truly, what would you spend your time doing? And just start there, and just start to pay attention. What are the things that you do in life that really you feel replenished and rejuvenated from? It's funny, I'm a runner and I love running, but my relationship with running has changed over the years. For some people, running is awful. And when they run, they don't feel better when they're done. For me, that's not the case. So guess what? Not everybody should run. I am amazed when I did personal training back in the day too, and I am amazed at how much people would suffer through things that they actually hated because they felt like they should be doing them. So again, self-care requires a deep level of intimacy and a lot of attention and a lot of patience and trial and error as well. If you're trying to figure out what diet is best for you, my suggestion there would be to try a bunch of different things. Do your research, and find what resonates and what might fit with your lifestyle, and then try them all, and then pay attention to your body. Listen to your body. Your body will tell you what it needs. I tell this story often that I, for a long time, tried to eat as closely to vegan as I could because I felt spiritually and ethically like that was the right, and health, from a health perspective, that was the best thing for me to do. It wasn't until I was pregnant with my second child when I just started listening to my body, and my body was telling me very different things. My body told me, you need to eat meat. You want to eat meat. And ever since then, I really do listen. And so what I've learned about myself is that my body really doesn't feel good when I eat a vegan diet. It really feels like something's missing. And looking back on all those years, I felt like that. I was not the healthiest person then just because I had a vegan diet. It was because my body was missing something that it desperately needed. And so now I eat intuitively. I listen to my body and I listen to its messages, and I trust that what it's telling me is the truth. And it hasn't failed me yet. So another part of self-care that I want to talk about too, and I've already mentioned this, is that I think, in my humble opinion, that what most people are missing in their self-care is spirituality. Spirituality is the missing link. I think it's easy for humans to say, okay, I get it. I understand the physical, the mental, the emotional aspect, and I can wrap my head around that. But how is spirituality even important? We are spiritual beings. We are energetic spiritual beings living in a human form. And that spiritual part of us has a whole set of its own needs. I think many of us, and my own experience included, we've confused spirituality with religion, and they are not the same things. Religion was created as a means of spirituality, but not all spirituality is religion. I think that there's a lot of problems with the religion today. Humble opinion. I have a lot of personal religious trauma. And so for a long time, I turned my back on spirituality. I didn't want anything to do with it, only to realize that part of my addiction and part of my anxiety and depression was that I wasn't feeding this very spiritual part of me that I've had ever since I was a child. Ever since, I can remember being very young and really wanting the experience of God. And, I was raised in a very strict, well, somewhat strict religious household, and we did things a certain way. And I was excited about my religion, just like the first time I sought help through conventional medicine. I thought, great, this religion is going to help me understand God. It's going to facilitate a relationship with God. That didn't happen for me. My religion gave me a lot of shame and basically taught me that the way I experience God, which is in nature and in crystals and in the animals and the air, actually wasn't the case, and that God only really happened within four walls. And I could go on and on there. But I think that a lot of us share that experience where, we're either disconnected from our religion or we have some religious trauma, and therefore we don't realize just how important, spirituality is. And so spirituality essentially just means reconnecting with that divine essence that's in all of us, reconnecting with our soul, with the fabric of our being, the part of us that is perfect and divine as it already is. Your innate healing ability is a partnership it's a partnership of all four aspects, let's be very clear, but your spiritual aspect is very much a part of that. Your spirit is perfect, regardless of what what your body's doing. And your spirit is also constantly speaking to you. That's where your intuition comes from. Again, so many of us have been trained out of our intuition. We're not listening to our intuition. We call ourselves crazy for having these insights. And where did that even come from? So spirituality is truly reconnecting with that deep essence inside of you. It's really connecting with yourself in that daily practice, but it also is the connectedness to other people and the connection with all that is. And so whether you call that God or higher power or source or goddess, it doesn't matter. To me, it's all the same thing. And spirituality is just our means of connecting with that. And when we do that, we have unlimited, infinite support available to us. That truly is where miracles happen, is in our spiritual aspect. And so if you really want to turn on your activated healing ability, start with your spiritual practice. Hands down. So much of what we see in the world, from disease to addiction, stems from a truly spiritually missing link, because we feel this emptiness inside. We feel this longing. We have this craving for something. And for many of us, that turns into craving for food, craving for relationships and codependency, without even realizing it. Binge watching Netflix or, shopping, there are multitudes of addictions, but that comes from this place of longing inside of us that can only be filled by a spiritual practice. And so, cultivating spirituality is deeply nourishing to all of the other aspects. It's imperative. It's a part of all of it. It supports and nourishes every aspect, as well as all of your self-care practices. Spirituality backdoored me through yoga. And it was really through yoga that I realized, oh, well, this is different. And you know what? If I get to decide what my spiritual practice looks like if yoga is my spiritual practice, I'm totally down for this. And so, the last 15, 20 years, I've literally been cultivating my own version of spirituality. And my own version of spirituality these days includes nature, it includes divine feminine, it includes crystals, it includes flowers and gardening, it includes meditation, qigong, all of these things. So every day when I show up to my spiritual practice, it's always a little different. You know, when we have a sense of spirituality and we have a regular spiritual practice, it helps us cultivate this sense of safety and trust and fulfillment. We find purpose in everything when we're spiritually connected. I mean, honestly, some days the way that, the way that I worship in my spiritual practice is like when I'm brushing my teeth, and just sending love to my teeth and appreciation for my teeth and all that they do for me. And truly making the most simple things in my life sacred, from mealtime to gardening to bedtime to baths. And so I really highly recommend just inventorying what your spiritual practice looks like. And is it working for you? Actually doing this with the entirety of self-care is a good idea. What are you currently doing for all four of your aspects in terms of self-care? And once you take a look at that, is it working? Are you getting the results that you're looking for using those self-care practices? And if the answer is no, it's time to make a change, right? So, yes. So again, one final thing too on spirituality is that, when we are truly spiritually connected, we don't get caught up in daily frustrations and struggles of our personality as much anymore, because we are truly able to experience life from the perspective of our soul. And let me tell you, I will tell you that, through all that's happening in the world today, I feel a lot of compassion and love and empathy from the collective standpoint, but I am not suffering because I have a higher perspective of it all. I am unaffected by the rigmarole, truly. And that's possible for all of you. It's possible for every single human being. We have choices, and we can make daily choices to have this higher perspective, that I'm not going to be affected and caught up in the rat race that the rest of humanity seems to be obsessed with. Spirituality really affords us that opportunity. And truly, in my experience in working with people, in my experience with working with people in transition and working with people in the integrative oncology, piece, that spiritual piece is the one that's missing. And so again, I encourage you to not only inventory all four aspects, but really take inventory of what your spiritual practice looks like. How do you feel connected to yourself? How do you feel connected to others and all that is? And how can you reconnect if you don't? It's a good place to start. So, just to review, where to begin? Where do we begin when we want to activate or further activate our innate healing ability? Deepening your self-awareness and begin your journey inward. Heal the relationship with yourself, right? Understand that the relationship with yourself is top priority. It's the greatest investment you can make. We all struggle with self-love, every single one of us. We're born into it. Most of us come from generations of trauma, and whatever your ancestors, whatever your parents were dealing with or struggling with, chances are you've inherited part of that too. And so really getting a hold of a handle on who you are and how you can better cultivate a deep, intimate relationship with yourself. And lastly, self-care, taking that self-care inventory. What are the ways that you are caring for yourself on all four levels, and with particular attention to the spiritual aspect. So my friends, you are multidimensional beings. You all have an innate ability to heal, and you are all powerful. I want each and every one of you to trust and believe in yourselves. I want you to know that you're not broken, incapable, or crazy. I want you to return to wholeness and to find what you truly need, your own answers inside of yourselves. And you're sovereign. Whether you realize it or not, whether you're exercising it or not, you are already sovereign. You are a divine, holy creature that is here to thrive and prosper in all ways. And that, my friends, is the good news that I have to share with you today. And if you're stuck in a health crisis, or if you're struggling with something in mind or body, know that you are far more powerful than you've ever been taught. It is truly inconvenient for the systems and institutions. We don't live in a society that really promotes self-empowerment, because many of them would be out of business. And so, don't look outside of yourself for empowerment. It comes from here. This is the place where you start. And I'm telling you, as simple as it sounds, if you follow the journey of self-care, self-love, and self-awareness, your innate healing ability will be activated to the greatest degree. And that, my friends, is the good news. So with that, I'm going to open this up to questions or comments, if you will. Does anyone have anything they would like to share or ask? So Jen is asking, how do you get your family to understand and respect that you need alone time, and how do you get alone time? That's a really great question. By setting boundaries and by not taking being courageous enough to ask, by being courageous enough to speak my truth of, hey, this is who I am and this is truly what I need. And really taking it upon myself to enforce that upon my family. So, I had worked from home for a long time, and I made the decision to rent space elsewhere so that I had a place to go that wasn't necessarily in the home. COVID has kind of skewed that a little bit for me, but I think that part of the hardest part of that for me was truly knowing that I was deserving of it, and that I could actually set my own boundaries around it, and that any opinion that my family had about it was their problem. Truly, it wasn't about me. And I think, at first, it took some of my family members a little while to understand and respect my boundaries, but they also started to realize that I was a pretty amazing person when I came home from my, also, I think, Jen, you mentioned you have a dog. The dog gives me a lot of reasons to be alone too. The dog and I have a lot of our own adventures, and, it's a good excuse to get out of the house. But these days, just a couple of years ago, really 2016 was the first year that I started planning solo trips. And, not necessarily luxurious trips, but like a camping weekend, like in a cabin or in a safe place, but, taking time or a couple days away. And I started to realize that that was some of my favorite time, that I was really a different person, that I was super productive and rejuvenated when I would come home from those things. So those are just a few examples of that. Great question. Great question. Does anyone else have anything they want to ask or share? No? Okay. Are you sure? I'll leave the chat up in case anyone decides that they have something they think of. Before we close, though, I just want to take a moment to mention some very exciting things. So many of you know that I have officially opened my virtual collective called Sovereignty, which basically is this, it's a space for us to inspire one another's spiritual practices. It is a spiritual collective where we commit to discovering and exploring and activating our personal sovereignty through our unique spiritual practices. So I don't really, care what your spiritual practice is. I want to celebrate it and inspire you to think outside the box of how you can best satisfy that aspect. Again, because I just feel like it's such a missing link. I really want to bring spirituality back to the masses. I want to start a spiritual revolution of, hey, your spirituality can be anything you want. You are the creator and you get to decide because you're sovereign. And therefore, you can, it can be life-changing. So this group essentially takes place mostly in a private Facebook group. I haven't thought, so if there are those of you that don't have Facebook, I have to think a little bit more about that. But most of the things that we're going to do, including, guided meditations and energy work, the monthly online healing circle. We're going to do some different workshops each and every month. This hasn't actually started yet. It will get started in a few weeks. Things will pick up in there. But yeah, so that's sovereignty. So all of those things will take place in the private Facebook community other than the healing circle. And there are many good things to come there. So I invite each and every one of you to step through those doors of that online congregation and help become part of this spiritual revolution with me. You know, and let's inspire each other and celebrate our unique differences and our similarities, and let's get reconnected. Also, I am teaching a Reiki 1 and 2 workshop, not this weekend, but the following weekend. I don't have a lot of space in Reiki 2, but I do in Reiki 1. So if you're interested in that, I invite you to ask me questions, and I'm happy to share that with you. Also, if Reiki is something that you're interested in, I offered this incentive to all new members of Sovereignty that an attunement will only cost $100, which is a nice discount. So if that's something that you're interested in, both of those things can line up. I also moderate a beautiful group coaching experience called Soul Mastery. There are many of you on this call that are a part of that group. Thank you so much for being here. I am probably likely going to open the doors to another round of Soul Mastery later this year. And we go through each of these topics: self-awareness, self-love, self-care, over a 6-month period. There are some individual coaching aspects to it. There's also a group coaching component with a lot of teaching and ritual in between. And more on that later. I just wanted to mention to you that if any of this resonated today, that I'm happy to dive deeper into all of it with you. And that group is a really great way to do that. So that's all I have for you, ladies. If you don't have anything else for me, you sure we don't have any more questions? Did you all find something useful and helpful? Yes?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Wonderful. So let's just end with a short guided meditation. I like to end this way often by just taking a few moments to settle the body right where you are. There's really no official protocol here. But let's just take a moment to shut the eyes down, really come into this present moment, and just begin to move your awareness inward. Just begin to explore what's happening inside of yourself. What's happening in your internal landscape? When we begin this journey inward, it is a different perspective from the inside out. And if it feels uncomfortable to be here, that's completely normal and okay. Just taking a few moments to sit with whatever it is that you're experiencing inside of your own bodies, and just allowing it to be okay. Even if there's things about your physical form that you wish you could change or that you wish you were different, can you just create space right now to just accept what is? Because truly, my friends, it's only through this authentic acceptance that we can begin to transcend our current reality. And let's just take both of our hands and place them over our hearts and really connect with this beautiful center that each of us share. And I invite you all to set the intention to listen a little more deeply, to commit to understanding yourself, knowing yourself more intimately, and inviting your body, your mind, your soul to speak to you with a reimagined commitment to listening. So just recommitting to that practice of just hearing what your body has to say. And truly setting the intention to understand what it means, what your innate healing ability needs to turn on even further. And really committing lastly to the practice of self-awareness, self-love, and self-care. We don't have to do them perfectly. But they are the true pathway to activated healing. So let's just take 3 deep breaths together, inhaling in and exhaling out. Inhaling, exhaling out. One final breath, inhaling and exhaling out. Releasing your hands. Slowly coming back to a more awakened place. And as you're ready in your own time, once again, opening your eyes. So once again, thank you so much for each and every one of you that were here with me. Thank you so much to everyone who's watching the replay and has gotten this far. I really honor and respect your willingness, and I hope to work and be with you all soon. Mwah, lots of love to each and every one of you. Namaste.